Today I would like to talk about the principles and strategies of the depopulation lobby, their operating principles and strategies. And so far I have identified 12, and I have placed them on a list in no particular order. The first one on my list is the misuse of science as a weapon. The depopulationists always use the latest technological innovations and scientific discoveries to advance the depopulation genocide one step further. To stay ahead of them, we must look at all technological innovations and scientific discoveries and figure out how they can be misused to damage our fertility and immunity. It is that simple, but it is very laborious and time-consuming, and one must also be multidisciplinary. They try to get a head start by often placing promising research under the control of the military-industrial complex and classify it as secret. This way they can misuse scientific discoveries and technological innovations until the rest of the scientific community catches up and provides evidence of harm, which takes time. And by then, of course, the damage is done. The second strategy is our killing imperceptibly. This operating principle could also be called the smaller the better and the slower the better. Every method of depopulation they employ must be imperceptible to the 5 senses humans have evolved to respond to threats. It must also be slow acting, so the cause and effect chain is obscured by the passage of time. If a threat cannot be seen, heard, smelled, felt, or tasted, then human beings will not respond to it and will fail to protect themselves. And if the damage done to the human reproductive and immune systems is over long periods of time and over multiple generations, then no one will notice. The developed world, being in the 3rd or even 4th generation of affected individuals, each generation is born increasingly damaged and has therefore no point of reference as to how they're damaged, because they never lived an undamaged life. The third operating strategy is that of plausible deniability, and I've discussed that here and there over the past few lessons. Every method of depopulation used by our genocidal governments and the UN system with the help of the military-industrial complex and the permission of religious authorities must be subject to easy manipulation through policies that have dual purposes, one public and the other classified. This allows governments and all those responsible for committing genocide to hide behind plausible deniability, so the legitimacy of the state and the rule of law can be preserved through semblance. The secret objectives of the Depop program are thus hidden behind duplicity and plausible deniability. In this fashion, when methods of depopulation and the damage they do are exposed, no one can prove beyond a reasonable doubt intent on the part of those responsible and correlation to the said method, and this shelters the state, which claims innocence, from legal liabilities and the loss of legitimacy. The fourth strategy might be called let them dig their own graves. The vast majority of people involved in the global depopulation program are not aware that their labor and wits are used to this end. This is the result of this fourth operating principle of the depopulation lobby: manipulation through compartmentalization of knowledge and tasks, hierarchical organizations, and financial incentives. This allows a very small number of individuals in the inner circle of the depopulation lobby to cheat everyone into working against their own best interests and digging their own graves. Compartmentalization prevents individuals from seeing the big picture and understanding the system of engineered depopulation. Hierarchical organizations allows those at the very top to delegate those below to do what is needed to advance a depopulation genocide without questioning authority. And financial incentives create the motivation necessary to force people to abandon their consciences to survive, as well as taking advantage of those worst traits of human nature to power the genocide. This organization locks everyone into a system designed to eliminate the vast majority from the face of the earth by virtue of their own efforts. The fifth operating strategy is that of using our weaknesses against us. This principle of the depopulation lobby is to target first and foremost and hit hardest those who indulge in what might be called vice: sexual promiscuity, drug abuse, smoking, alcohol, gluttony, and so on. They do this because it is easier to justify attacks against those who sin or have unhealthy lifestyles, and because the depopulation program is ethically framed by religious authorities who think in terms of good and evil. They also do this because those who burn the candle at both ends are expected to die prematurely anyhow, and their death, morbidity, and sterility will not raise unwanted questions and can be blamed on their own behavior. Last but not least, they target sinners because their disappearance will not be mourned and socially and society will benefit. Incidentally, that is why the depopulation lobby encourages self-indulgent and destructive behaviors and floods society with legal and illegal drugs. To this end, the most potent depopulation toxins are hidden inside sex products, recreational drugs, tobacco, alcohol, and snacks. The sixth strategy is that of poisoning the gifts. Anything and everything government and the UN system give for free, whether to individuals or nations, in the developing or developed world, has a hidden depopulation purpose, be it medicines, vaccines, aid, water filtration systems, insecticides, treated bed nets, social assistance, medical care, etc. This is also true of the many NGOs that work with the system and within the system, and are active in the developing world especially, and equally true of NGOs that work with the system in the developed world and target the poor. This operational principle is called "let them come to us" rather than chase after them, and is intended to prevent resistance to Depop methods and to save money. The intelligent reaction to such quote-unquote gifts is to say thanks but no thanks. If you accept such gifts, you will lose far more than you will gain. You will lose either your fertility, your health, your independence, your sovereignty, and dignity, or all of the above, because every one of those so-called gifts will be laced with poison and comes with conditions as well as hidden objectives. You may even lose your life. The seventh operational strategy is that of taking the top. By seizing control of the highest authorities, be they secular or religious, the depopulation lobby is in a position of highest authority in every domain, be it medical, pharmacological, political, ethical, environmental, scientific, etc. To speak from the highest podium and dictate policy, the depopulation lobby has first created the international system and placed it above the national authorities, and then over time has infiltrated and taken over the leadership of all or most national authorities. This way, all false research and subversive policies they issue from the international level can be seconded at the national level and cannot be challenged. A perfect example is that of medicine and public health, whereby the World Health Organization, the WHO, was created and declared the highest medical authority, followed by its 6 regional offices, and last by national ministries of health, all of which are fully controlled by the depopulation lobby. To have absolute control of human health and turn medicine and public health into the handmaidens of genocide, the depopulation lobby then set out to create quote-unquote independent medical organizations, to use them to drown any opposing voice, censor all dissenting scientists and doctors, and overwhelm the public with false medical information. The 8th operational strategy is that of destroying the family. They weaken the 3 essential social bonds: individual conscience, family structure, and social safety nets, so as to create an impossible social and economic environment for families to thrive in and raise children. The individual's conscience is weakened by forcing citizens to choose between being decent or being employed. And the depopulationists do this by keeping unemployment artificially high, wages artificially low, and the fear of losing one's job constant. The latter being accomplished with high immigration rates, short unemployment insurance coverage, and competition with low-wage regions. The family structure is weakened by keeping living costs high so as to force both men and women to earn a wage to be able to sustain a family, by delaying entry into the workforce and denying young workers a living wage, by making employment contingent on unnecessary schooling and qualifications, by criminalizing previously acceptable social behaviors to destroy families through incarceration, by depriving parents of the ability to discipline children as they see fit, by long employment hours and short vacation time, by high taxes, by flooding society with drugs, both legal and illegal, by flooding television and movie theaters with programs and movies that deride family values, by elevating same-sex marriages to equal status with traditional marriages, by misusing popular culture to turn men and women against one another, and by intruding into family life with laws designed to destroy families and transfer their assets to the judiciary or the state. And social safety nets are weakened by misallocating taxpayers' money towards wasteful programs and institutions to starve social programs of needed funds, by encouraging crimes of desperation and subverting the safety and cohesiveness of communities, and by allowing the free transfer of capital, technology, and production facilities to foreign countries, while at the same time allowing corporations free and unfettered markets. The combined results of all of the above is to prevent families from forming, to force their demise once they form, and to limit the number of children born to couples, which is why now a majority do not marry, a majority of marriages fall apart, and half of all couples remain childless. Strategy number 9, no one is spared. This 9th operational principle of the depopulation lobby is to subject everyone to Depop methods and spare no one. Only the architects of the Depop program and those belonging to the highest echelon of power protect themselves and their offspring, and they do this without the knowledge of all other individuals involved in the program and fully aware of the depopulation genocide. This principle is considered necessary to be able to morally justify subverting the reproductive and immune systems of mankind. What they do unto us, they also do unto themselves, which is why the intellectual and genetic quality of our leaders is as diminished as our own, and why we seemingly have only simpletons in power. You will note, for instance, that when religious leaders meet, they drink only from glass bottles, whereas when politicians meet, they drink from plastic bottles. The religious leaders are, of course, in charge of the Depop program and protect themselves, whereas politicians, save for a select few, are clueless and poison themselves with every mouthful they drink. This is how those in control of the depopulation genocide protect themselves, for instance, from bisphenol poisoning. The same applies to all other Depop methods, but they cannot be observed as they happen in the privacy of homes. Strategy 10, seize the wealth. This 10th operational principle of the depopulation lobby is to concentrate the world's wealth in their own hands, both at the individual level and in banking, so as to subject everyone else to their absolute power. Monetary coercion replaces military force. It is a step up from previous generations, but nevertheless, it is a coercive system. As the depopulation program advanced to every region of the world, so the concentration of wealth advanced along with it, and was facilitated by friendly policies. Wealth wielded by the inner circle of the Depop lobby forces people and nations to abdicate ever more control, rights and liberties to the international system, so the covert depopulation and coerced globalization matrix of control can progress to the next phase. On the level of individuals, this was necessary to destroy the middle class, transfer capital from the developed to the developing world, and reverse the affluence of the developed world, so the developing world can catch up. On the national level, this was needed to transfer control over natural resources from national leaders to international or multinational corporations to make vital natural resources and the goods produced from them available across the world, and thus close the gap between the developing and the developed world. Now that I have exposed the global depopulation program and governments can no longer use foreign aid to fund the depopulation genocide in the developing world, these great concentrations of personal wealth are needed more than ever, which is why the world's billionaires have pledged to give the greater bulk of their wealth to quote-unquote philanthropy. Their idea of philanthropy, of course, is sterilizing vaccines, poisonous genetically modified crops and animals, water filtration systems that render the water into a sterilizing agent, malaria therapies misused to deliver the sterilizing artemisinin into the bloodstream of every man, woman and child in the developing world, insecticide-treated bed nets that double as contraceptives, etc. First and foremost, this great and unprecedented concentration of wealth enables the depopulation lobby to seize control over food and water, thus over the basic elements of life. The depopulationists need full control over the basic elements of life in order to poison every human being on the planet into sterility and morbidity through food and beverages, which are the inescapable necessities of life. They do this through agrochemical and agricultural biotechnology corporations that have been allowed to merge in defiance of all competition laws to the point where 90% of the world's seeds, pesticides and herbicides are controlled by half a dozen multinational corporations that are soon to become just 3. In this system, the depopulationists are the shepherds and we are the sheep. It is a system designed to deprive us all of free will and sovereignty. Strategy 11, hide Depop behind national security. While pretending to govern transparently, the depopulation lobby uses national security to hide the crimes they commit to control population growth. More government documents are classified now than at any other time in history, both numerically and proportionally. And the vast majority of documents classified and buried under the pretext of national security are in one way or another related to the depopulation genocide. In addition to secrecy, the depopulation lobby uses other strategies to hide things in plain sight. For instance, to openly exchange information about progress of sterilization by fluoridation, the depopulation lobby publishes research that measures the level of fluoride in urine, but keeps to itself the threshold known to result in sterilization or partial sterilization. When all other methods of concealing the depopulation genocide are insufficient, such as compartmentalization of knowledge, hierarchical structures, and financial incentives, our genocidal governments bury everything under national security. The irony is that crimes committed to complete the depopulation genocide and hidden behind national security are the greatest threat to national security, because they shorten the lives, deprive us of good health, and terminate the genetic lineages of the very people governments pretend to protect by keeping secrets. And the double irony is that the military-industrial complex, sustained with taxpayers' money to purportedly protect the people from foreign threats, are the only enemy of the people, at least in the short run, since its personnel exist primarily to conceive and apply covert chemical and biological depopulation methods on the unsuspecting populations so as to preserve international peace by, in effect, waging war on their own people. National security is therefore used to undermine the people's security, well-being, and lives, to prevent conventional war between nations by waging covert chemical and biological war on the fertility and longevity of citizens. Strategy number 12, smoke and mirrors. This 12th operational principle of the depopulation lobby is to use proxies to divert attention from themselves and keep the public ignorant as to who is responsible, and to use fiction to blur the line between what is true and what is not, so as to keep the public confused and confounded about what to believe. This operational principle is properly called smoke and mirrors. The Church, for instance, feeds the notion that the Freemasons are responsible for the ills of the world. The Freemasons, of course, do not exist and have never existed. They are fictional. Those who describe themselves as Freemasons are merely working for the Church and act as Freemasons so that clerics have a ready scapegoat. At best, they are the disaffected members of the Church faction that lost control of the Church and seeks to regain it at any given time in history. The state, on the other hand, uses shills and thralls who are paid by the military-industrial complex to infiltrate NGOs or to set up NGOs that then keep their members turning in circles to accomplish nothing whatsoever. And that also keeps civil society focused on single issues, thus preventing the people from seeing the whole picture and changing the system. They also produce outlandish articles and videos about the issues that legitimate NGOs fight to expose or correct. They do this to confuse and confound the public and to discredit, delegitimize those who tackle these issues and are genuine activists and dissenters, as well as to prevent a true understanding of those issues. To this end, they take a kernel of truth and wrap it in outlandish exaggerations and confabulations. Bankers, Jews, Khazars, and aliens are but some of the scapegoats used by shills paid by the military-industrial complex to protect the governing class from the truth and from responsibility for the depopulation genocide. And transhumanism, smart dust, and mind control are some of the fictions created to protect the true intentions, methods, and objectives of the depopulation lobby. Another invented entity is the Satanists, who provide a great diversion for both secular and religious leaders, but who also do not exist, at least not as an organized and powerful organization, but rather as single, disturbed individuals and small groups similarly disturbed, who wield neither power nor influence.